Coming up on AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti.
Think about the ways that enterprise would be able to enable their workers, to have people connected to the business when they need to be connected.
We're taking a deep dive into UCaaS. Unified Communications as a Service enables telephone functionality plus collaboration applications and services to be delivered over the internet. It's being driven by the desire to eliminate on-site hardware maintenance contracts and management costs, as well as the need for redundancy to respond to those pesky outages. Welcome to AVANT Technology Insights. I'm your host, Ken Presti. The link between solving business challenges and cutting-edge technologies has become tighter and more complex than ever before. In this podcast series from AVANT Research and Analytics, we help enterprise decision makers sort through the business case, the value, the challenges, and ultimately the bottom line of technology adoption. So listen to us at your desktop, take us in the car, tune in from the commuter train, or download us at the gate. You'll find us on Apple, Spotify, and Google, as well as in 19 countries across the globe. My guest today stands at the head of a team of UCaaS subject matter experts who work with trusted advisors to help drive awareness of UCaaS solutions, understand the differentiators, and ultimately help customers grasp the benefits of these technologies in meeting their day-to-day technology needs. He's the Senior Director of Channel Sales Engineering at 8x8. I want to thank him for joining us on the program. He is Jamaal Savwoir. So, Jamaal, I'd like to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for being here today, here to talk about UCaaS, if you don't mind. Let's start here. Given the variety of features and applications involved in UCaaS, how do you personally define it? Because it can mean so many things to so many different people.
Yeah, so it really focuses on those two key terms, unified and communications, and then the back end of that being as a service. And from 8x8's perspective, communications happen in a variety of ways, and we want employees to be able to communicate with each other, and we also want to enable employees to communicate with the end customers or consumers of that business. That could be across, your traditional voice, could be inbound or outbound calling, but increasingly there are ways that people communicate that are not voice centric. Could be video first organizations, they could be mobile first organizations, or they could be entirely focused around messaging and collaboration from a text or document perspective. So really, if you want to be fully unified communications capable, you need to touch all those areas. And all those interactions need to be high quality, they need to be timely, and they need to be searchable so the organization can get the full benefit of what the communications platform brings to the table.
So with that in mind, it's been said that some of the features have become so commoditized. You know, one service provider will roll out certain features, and then within a couple of months, other service providers are putting that out. Do you see that differentiation that every company needs? Do you see differentiation coming on the various services that are offered, or is it on, support services, price, things along that line? How do you determine where the differentiators are between what one company is offering and what all the others are offering?
I do see several differences, even though a lot of the marketing messages are the same. Um, One thing that seems to distinguish the different providers is the reliability of the solution, or whether or not they own the technology or perhaps partner with other providers to deliver a more complete suite of solutions. And there are those customers that look at their UC landscape or the UCaaS landscape and prefer to take a best of breed approach in building a solution. But I'd see the differences really are in being able to own the technology stack and react to different market forces. Some customers need really tight integrations between their communications platform and their system of record. That could be a CRM system or an ERP system. If you're in different verticals, your UCaaS deployment may be heavily focused on connectivity to analog devices versus soft phones or mobile applications. So there are some players, I think, in our space that maybe focus or can play in one area, but can't play in all areas. And I think that's where you start to see some differentiation, especially for enterprises where they have a multitude of different communications needs, and that could be in different parts of their business or in different regions of the world.
So if I'm an enterprise decision maker and I'm kicking tires on UCaaS, as it were, am I going to be looking at which providers primarily focus on my particular vertical market? Am I going to be looking at like things like the existence of a global footprint, or how do I suss out what those different aspects are that are really going to relate to what my company needs?
Well, I've seen sort of two different drivers. If the drivers for evaluating UCAS are primarily cost centric, then there is a lot of consideration for just the dollars and cents value of the solution. And that's where being able to deploy into multiple regions from a single provider start to benefit from an ROI perspective instead of having to piecemeal a solution together across a couple of different vendors or a couple of different solutions. Um, there's also some drivers that are really around transforming the business, around taking the business in a different direction. And that could be enabling some of those other ways to communicate, like collaboration aspects, or bringing more video into the organization, so that you can do business in different ways. So I'd say that there's sort of the value driven enterprises that are just looking to cut costs and take take that sort of cost reduction approach, and then there's the more the business transformation, enable new ways to work approach, are the two approaches I see.
So from the standpoint of the end customer, the prospect, if you will, I'm going to be looking at UCAS number one from a bottom line perspective, because everything's got to look good on a spreadsheet these days, and we all know that. But I can also build a case for it around how I'm going to be able to better service the customer and be able to extend my contact with the customer in a number of different ways. How do you see, number one, do you see that as the appropriate way to approach it? And number two, when it comes to those business aspects, those quality aspects, aside from dollars and cents, what are the main areas where you think that enterprise decision maker should look?
There are a couple of key areas. Obviously, if you're looking at enabling your workforce, and you talked extensively about connecting with customers, there's also ways to approach that from how well are your own employees engaged internally, and what helps them to stay connected, especially as you look at distributed workforces, people operating in small groups or teams that are not necessarily geographically close, but they still need to be in close coordination. Um, those are key factors that I think enterprises have to consider as they look at their communications plans going forward. And those tools that those teams or those individuals end up relying on have to be available. They have to be secure. They have to be the types of thing that they're going to you know consider part of their day-to-day activity, and how they interact with it with each other, and take full advantage of it. The last thing an enterprise wants to do is go through the solution design and the transformation of employing a new system, and then have a poor user adoption rate, or have shadow IT activities going on where one employee or one group of employees just kind of chose another tool because they were not satisfied with with what the business brought to the table. So I think that taking that long view is certainly something enterprises should consider.
Okay, I understand. It's been said that the PBX is effectively dead. Do you agree with that? Is that really where we've arrived at that point? Is if a company still has a PBX or even an IP PBX, are they that far behind the eight ball that they've got to do something with this now? Because one of the things that I always come down to is this: if I'm going to make a transformation in this direction, on anything that's essential as my telephony system, then that's a big risk. If this thing goes down, I've got a problem. On the other hand, if I don't make a move and it goes down, then I've still got a problem. So it's a risk either on the adoption side, or it's a risk on the non-adoption side once my old system for the last 10 to 12 years peters out.
Yeah, I think, and, unfortunately for the manufacturers out there, I think PBXs have had their day. For quite a while in this side of the industry, there was a significant amount of risk associated with moving to the cloud. And but if you look at industry analysts, Gartner, et cetera, the risk is not moving to the cloud fast enough because the innovation is not happening in those premises-based systems. They are continuously going end of life, end of sale, out of maintenance by the people that traditionally maintain those systems. Not to mention the fact that the individual people that have traditionally administered or maintained or used those systems or are expert in those systems are quickly moving on to other phases of their careers or their lives, and those types of people just aren't around as much anymore. So from every way you look at it, you know PBX technology, that piece of equipment in that closet or hanging on that wall has probably seen its final days in terms of really new business or enabling enterprises going forward.
Okay, so in terms of moving on, let's say I have a small IT team supporting a large and distributed organizations. What questions do you think I should be asking UCAS vendors about deployment? Because obviously, like I said a moment ago, I've got a lot wrapped up in this thing. I've got to make sure it goes right the first time, or I've got some questions, tough questions that I'm going to have to answer.
A lot of it starts around features. It starts around capabilities that are going to make it easier for your users to transition. Many enterprises are successful at getting their users to adopt a soft phone type of a way to work or a mobile way to work, but many of them still need a physical phone instrument, on the desk that's going to do as many of those things that user is used to as possible. So being able to deliver a particular set of keys on the phone, or or lights, or at least coming in with something that's a good alternative to that, and having a transition plan in place is going to make it easy for users in different departments with different work habits to transition to that new system and feel comfortable with it and feel excited about it. Quite honestly, so those are key factors. But when you look at just comparing what that enterprise may be accustomed to from a premises-based equipment perspective, and you know eliminating some of that FUD about moving to the cloud, um, you definitely need to have some conversations about the network infrastructure that's going to be necessary in order to successfully operate that cloud environment. You're going to want to have conversations around security, conversations around reliability, and what kind of tools the UCAS vendors are going to bring to the table to help that IT department manage and maintain and be aware of what's going on in the system, so they can respond to issues when they do occur. So I'd say again, it goes from the feature set conversation to the security and reliability conversation, to the administration conversation about how it's going to be maintained on an ongoing basis.
Let's take the security piece of that first. How do I know if my UCAS system is perfectly secure, to the extent that perfect security is even possible in this world? But I
Yeah.
mean, what am I what what am I going to be looking for as clues to whether or not there's something that I need to change there or something is going to miss?
There are a couple of aspects of that. I'd first of all start with the idea of user management. Most of these UCAS solutions do offer some sort of a soft client, or mobile application, and the ability to secure the login information. That's going to be critical to the situation. They may also want to ask questions about options for encryption. Does the provider offer any option for eliminating plain text transmission of either the signaling or the audio stream itself? Is that something that could be encrypted? um, and then it gets down to things like endpoint security. How secure are the endpoints? Are they using standard passwords, or do they manage are they able to maintain individual passwords for each device, so that you don't have the situation where someone can just guess at it and then get in and corrupt the device that way? There are also concerns about fraud and regulatory compliance, and ask those hard questions about you know things that are important to your industry. Whether if you're in healthcare, it might be a HIPAA concern. If you have to deal with other personally identifiable information, you may want to look at even stronger standards for compliance. And depending on your particular jurisdiction, or if you operate in Europe and you need to be GDPR compliant, those sorts of conversations should start early in the process.
Okay, so security obviously needs to be interwoven into all of this. Let's move over to the network side for a minute. How do I know that my current infrastructure can handle it? Do I need like an MPLS? Do I need SD-WAN to support this and to make sure that I've got the stability that I need for this kind of a critical application? And what happens when I've got, in the scenario that I gave you a moment ago with the distributed workforce, I've got people in different offices across the country or around the world even, and some of those people may be working from home. That's a lot of variables to try to track.
Yeah, you're correct about that. A couple of those things start with the architecture of that cloud-based UCaaS solution you're looking at. If you have a global distributed enterprise and you have, various amounts of workers or employees and customers you need to communicate with all around the world, the infrastructure of that UCaaS provider matters, and it matters a lot. And you don't want a situation where, even if you've looked at your network from a bandwidth availability perspective, or you've put in the right type of dedicated internet access circuits, or you've engineered an SD-WAN solution, you still don't want to have a situation where you put a user in a distant location and all their voice traffic has to go back, halfway around the world. So I would say definitely not only look at your network architecture and the reliability of your circuits, maybe look at doing failover, or even better, putting in some type of SD-WAN solution where you can categorize traffic and put the right priority on voice. But also, is that UCaaS provider designed in a way that's going to make the best use of that optimized network that you put in place? So those two are very key components to this to discuss and to consider.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And to that point, and when you're looking at something that's as critical as that, and you got all of these different, tennis balls in the air, if you will, can you roll this out on an incremental basis to kind of get things going to see how you like it? And if you can do that proof of concept, what are some of the things that you should be looking at to determine the true success of that proof of concept?
Yeah, that's really the only way that I've seen a proof of concepts work well, Ken, is to really think ahead about what those success criteria are. And it could be based on certain uh, dialing capabilities, users having mobility to move from place to place have been some good criteria to use, and really give the solution a solid test period with users that are uh, committed to provide their feedback. That's a critical step in the process, because if you I've seen some trials or proof of concepts go in a direction where the criteria weren't well defined. The users didn't really provide the feedback, and it just ends up being a very extended and not as useful time for the customer to really evaluate the solutions. The flip side of that coin is, to think about it in terms of the critical success factors for your business, whether that be call handling by a particular role or user in the business. Let's say the headquarters receptionist, they need to be able to handle calls a certain way, or feel comfortable with the integrated part of the solution that's going to tie them into the CRM, or the ability to handle multiple calls for multiple executives. Put those things in the proof of concept use case that really will matter when you deploy the solution. And that's a great way to test it out and determine if that's going to work for you or not.
So does it make sense to have a committee that does this? You have people, to be dealing with things like, I've got people who are going to be working these phones who aren't particularly technologists. So I need one level of of training for them that I may not need for some of the other people. And I've got all these different interests within my organization. Do I basically need to put together a tiger team so that we can establish what those criteria would be to make sure that everybody is properly represented?
Yeah, that's one way to do it. Definitely in a larger environment, and again, find those things that are going to make the project successful, and develop use that proof of concept to develop those internal champions. I've seen that used successfully in several sales opportunities, where those stakeholders are involved early on, and then you almost get that from a sales perspective. You get those individuals championing for your solution and really sort of being heavy influencers to the decision process because they've had the experience. They understand how different their work life is going to be from what they have today to what they're moving towards. So that could be a very positive thing in a sales environment to help the whole process move forward.
And of course, one of the more difficult questions that I always ask on this and basically any technology is that there's always going to be times, no matter how hard we try, that things don't go as well as we'd like to see them go, especially as we're either moving into the new technology or we're getting our people up to speed on the new technology. When it comes to UCAS, when things go wrong, not to say that they go wrong often, but when they do, what are some of the more typical areas that you have to look out for? When they do go wrong, where do they go wrong?
I'd say the place where things tend to go wrong can sometimes be miscommunication about expectations. Those are the easier things to I think to overcome. Um, some of it has to do with the technology itself. Maybe if you decided that you were going to go with a full soft phone rollout and eliminate as many hard phones from the environment as possible, that may not go according to plan, or the laptop or PC hardware you have just may not be fully functional, even though you've got a fully re-engineered network and everything's looking great. The devices themselves may end up being, the point of contention with the users because they just don't enjoy the experience. So a couple of those areas can be sticking points. There are also some times where, again, you expect an integration to produce a particular result, and the business pivots to something else, and maybe they don't end up getting the results they expect. So some of those things are, are a little more difficult to overcome. So it is a fluid environment. Change is typically has its ups and downs, but I think on the upside for UCAS, it's definitely the way to go.
That's awesome. That's great. So, my final question is, if you're having dinner with a friend of yours who is an enterprise decision maker and he says, Jamal, I'm thinking about doing this UCAS thing. What would be the main thing that you would want to tell him at that point? Could be encouragement or cautionary, but what would help him the most in terms of assessing the opportunity, assessing who to work with, assessing what he needs to do within his own company, any of those? What would be your top line of advice?
Yeah, I'd say think about it certainly from a planning perspective, and you know most of the enterprises that I would have that kind of conversation with end up having to deal with that whole distributed workforce thing. I think that is one of the key factors driving the adoption of UCAS is just the fact that people work very differently. So me being kind of a silver lining guy, I would certainly focus on the upside. Think about the ways that enterprise would be able to enable their workers to have people connected to the business when they need to be connected, being able to take advantage of all the different modes of communication, leveraging the messaging, leveraging the collaboration, but not sacrificing the reliability of the voice and the traditional kind of telephony communications along with that. So that's where I would focus the conversation is let's talk about how this is going to enable your business to go forward, how you're going to be able to do more with what you have, take advantage of business opportunities because all of your workers will be able to be connected and you'll be able to deliver results for your customers that you're currently constrained by your premises-based phone system. So that's where I would take the conversation.
Jamaal Savwoir of 8x8, thank you so much for joining us today. Some great observations, and from the standpoint of somebody who would be looking at UCaaS at this point in time over the next 6 to 12 months, I could see where this would be some very valuable information, and we thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Ken.
You've been listening to AVANT Technology Insights with Ken Presti, featuring information and opinions on how key technologies can be leveraged to solve business problems. AVANT Technology Insights is a service of AVANT Communications, an IT decision-making platform for next-generation technologies. All opinions expressed are those of the guests and the host. For more information, please visit www.goavant.net. That's www.goav as in victory, ant.net. For AVANT Research and Analytics, this is Ken Presti.